What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with 444, and we're talking running back trade targets for week 4. But before we get started, remember to like this video and subscribe. And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 444.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. And exclusive for our YouTube audience, use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%. Now let's go ahead and dive right in with our first player, Jahmyr Gibbs. With David Montgomery down, Jahmyr Gibbs finally got his big break. Unfortunately, the break amounted to 9.2 fantasy points in PPR. After 2 weeks of feeling like Gibbs was being held back by Montgomery's presence, his increase in workload on the ground did absolutely nothing for his fantasy value. Gibbs' performance wasn't really dreadful. He had 17 carries for 80 yards and 1 reception for 2 yards. The only issue was that his receiving upside just disappeared. And it didn't go to another back. Detroit didn't throw to the other backs, and it was Sam Laporta that saw a big increase in workload. This was more likely less about how they would utilize Gibbs as a primary back and more to do with the way that they chose to attack Atlanta's defense. The next 2 matchups for Detroit are run-friendly, Green Bay and Carolina. If the Gibbs manager is just feeling extremely frustrated that the running back that they drafted as a likely top 12 running back is barely checking in at a low-end RB2, make an offer and grab Gibbs because the talent is there and the upside is there. Now, this next player might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but buy Aaron Jones. The big reason, though, why I want to roster Jones is that we have seen 2 weeks of A.J. Dillon as the lead back, and he is 100% not it. He looks bad. His yards per carry last week was at 3.67. He's yet to score a touchdown. Any receiving upside that we thought he had is completely gone. And given how bad Dillon has been, those goal line carries that he earned over the past couple of years, those could tilt back to Aaron Jones. Jones gave us 26 fantasy points in week 1. And their overall schedule is run-friendly, particularly weeks 16 and 17. You like to see that. Buy Jones for the long-term benefit. Now, on this next one, I'm going to circle back to Jonathan Taylor because after Zach Moss tore up the Baltimore defense with 30 carries for 122 yards and 2 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown, it is becoming more and more apparent that Jonathan Taylor is a strong buy candidate. Despite never having a breakout year, for all his failures, Zach Moss is technically a competent back. Is he Jonathan Taylor? No. But unlike Deion Jackson, he is finding no issues being successful on the ground because the Colts offense as a whole really isn't that bad. The line looks better this year. The receiving core is good. The quarterbacking has been solid. So one of 2 things is going to happen here. Either the Colts feel like they're a legitimate contender to win the division, and they technically are, and say, JT, let's make this right. Let's go make a playoff run. And then JT comes back and the offense thrives. Or the Colts could decide to just move forward with Zach Moss. He looks good. It's working. Why not? And they would say, okay, since we want to officially move on from Jonathan Taylor, they would stop asking for such insanely unreasonable trade value and make a realistic trade with a contender. And Jonathan Taylor goes to another team that's a contender and he thrives there. Either way, I think we see Jonathan Taylor on the field mid to late October at the latest, and now is the perfect time to snatch him up. I don't think that Derrick Henry has lost a step, at least not a big step, but this isn't Derrick Henry's big issue. The Titans are just a terrible team. In week 1, he had just 15 carries for 63 yards. Thankfully, he got a couple of receptions with big yardage to save us. Week 2 was better, but 18 fantasy points against the Chargers defense is just not what we expect from Derrick Henry. Week 3, 11 carries, 20 yards, and to make matters worse, Tajay Spears outsnapped Derrick Henry in 2 of 3 games this season. Tajay Spears looks great, but you gotta remember, change of pace backs look good for a reason. They're brought in to work with a different approach than the lead back has to deal with on early downs. So Tajay Spears averaging 9 yards per carry on 3 carries for 27 yards does not mean that he's the messiah. The likelihood that the Titans look at Henry and Spears and say, nah, we gotta bench Henry, that's non-existent. But panic around Derrick Henry is huge right now, and this is the perfect time to buy super low. Now let's wrap things up with one of my favorite players, James Cook. James Cook is performing at an incredibly high level from a real football perspective. He looks excellent. His yards per carry are strong. He's obviously a reliable receiving outlet. His snap count is strong, and yet all of that happens, and the Bills just won't allow him to get a rushing touchdown. Thus far, Cook has none. Latavius Murray has 2. Damian Harris has 1. doesn't really seem fair. Neither one of them looks particularly good, but they get the opportunity, and the result is James Cook posting excellent numbers that just don't provide a ton of fantasy value. Yet. I might be overly optimistic, but the touchdowns will come. They might not be frequent enough to give him consistent top 5 upside, but he'll give you low-end RB1, high-end RB2 production. Cook is getting the carries. That is the big part here. He has clearly asserted himself as the RB1, and the Cook manager in your league might be willing to part with him, and more willing than you might realize. They likely have another RB1 on their roster, maybe an additional strong RB2. Now is an excellent time to buy Cook because his production should actually increase as the Bills face more competitive teams. The game scripts could benefit his receiving upside, and he should be able to continue to get the bulk of the carries. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you want more fantasy insights and tips, head over to 444.com/plans and sign up for a subscription today. And exclusively for our YouTube audience, use promo code YouTube at checkout to save 25%.